Craig Monahan rang us up, would have at least been 8 to 10 years ago now. At that point, he just sent me a script through and looked it through and thought, yeah, this would be pretty exciting, especially seeing I had a little bit of knowledge on what was going on with Richard Nesbitt, who was involved at Hillsville at the time and helped sort of set that program up and running. And I think that was probably the connection with Craig and Richard himself, you know, initially. The idea of inmates needing a form of, you could probably use the word rehabilitation, but just probably interest. Sometimes just being busy and also putting your time and effort into caring for someone or something else can have some, you know, therapeutic effect on a person, you know, that can really change them around. And I think the idea of being able to take some responsibility, here's something wild that you can possibly work with, and it's a great venture for anybody that wants to go down that path. I was introduced to him with a group of other people as they just came and had a bit of a pre-production meeting just to see what was involved, what was, you know, a bit of hands-on, a bit of a look at what's involved with the whole process of handling birds. And straight away, I guess, recognised that he was a guy that's willing to sort of take it all in. Probably half a day just sat with one of the eagles and just sort of chilled, you know. I got the eagle a little bit used to Don and vice versa. There are some vibes that birds and dogs especially, can pick up on a person, and how much that plays a part in the whole process, I'm not 100% sure of, but I know that if someone's calm and approaches an animal in the right attitude, they pick up on it. With birds, you've got to have a humble approach, you know. You come in quietly and they pick up on all those little idiosyncrasies, you know. And I think Don was great. Yeah, it's been good to work with. So I had 3 mature eagles, and once our wedge-tails start to mature, and they're dropping feathers, you know, every year, and as each year they get darker and darker, and there really weren't a lot of immature birds available. In fact, you know, virtually nothing that was first year, and then to find 2 or 3 to double up, it was so easy to work with mature birds, which basically look the same. And you know that they're pretty close because you'll get everybody come up going, is that Grace, or is that Stella, or even is that Bart? Like, so you know that even when, you know, if we've been shooting this for, you know, a few weeks now, that people still can't pick the difference. Well, I've had Grace, which is a female wedge-tailed eagle, and I've had her when she came in as an injured bird. It's going back to probably 94, 95. Grace was possibly 10 years old when I got her as an injured bird, hit by a car on the side of the road, eating, which often happens. They eat a lot of carrion and a lot of dead food. We don't have vultures in Australia, so it's kind of like a substitute for you know, other countries having clean up birds that can clean up sort of carcasses and stuff. So she got bowled over, checked out with the vets, and realised that she's got very little chance of survival. And since then we've got to a stage where she can fly, but she's not competent enough to really take off and chase something down. Should end up, if anything, back on the side of a road looking for an easy meal. You can tell she's got some feathers that are drooping, these allulars. They're kind of like the leading feathers on the wing there, droop down. It's really the wrist where all the primaries and secondaries come off there, and that's where the injury was. So in using a bird like that in this production, it's been perfect because she's already got that injury, and she's a quiet bird to work with. She's originally wild, like I said, but with that comes a lot of just temperate kind of mature behaviour versus the other birds that I have, which are a different kettle of fish. The other bird we have is Bart, and that's a male wedge-tailed eagle. It came from a zoo over in Perth, and this is a bird that was hand-raised, so it was imprinted onto people. Great bird. He's just got his little quirky behaviour, especially around food, like they do have. All eagles get quite aggressive around food. It's something that they want to protect once they've got something. Even though you're providing the food, they they don't see that as that. They see that you as a threat or competition. So there's no getting around that, you know. And Bart's a great flying bird. I've used him a lot on films and he's pretty reliable. And then we've got Stella, which to my knowledge an imprinted bird. It certainly has some behaviours of imprinting. A friend of mine up on the Gold Coast was kind enough to loan me his bird. He's had Stella for probably 10 years. And so that's a different kettle of fish altogether compared even with Bart and Grace. It's a bit like a blue heeler. You can have one that can lick you to death and you can have one that will bite you. And they all have their own personalities within the species. So we work around really a feeding regime, working really at what I call their hunting weight, which was what they'd be responding at that weight in the wild. Anything over that, you'll get a bird that starts to get a lot more toey and a bit more suspicious on things, and then you keep feeding that bird up, it'll just go sit in a tree and say, I'm not doing nothing. I'm just sitting here because I'm an eagle and I'll do what I want. So there is some discipline in terms of working that bird at their optimum flying weight. I suppose what really got me interested is just the psychology behind animals and training animals and building this trust with a wild bird, and then being able to have that trust to the point where you're working as a team, you know? And that developed into not just an interest, but those tools and that knowledge that I learnt from experienced people overseas really helped with rehab work that I got involved in, rehabbing birds and getting it trained up, seeing that it's healthy enough to be released to the wild, and there's some real satisfaction. I suppose turned what was a part-time sort of interest into a full-time business running a commercial wildlife facility. I've got a lot of interest. I think I've got a fairly eclectic approach to, you know, fairly balanced. At one stage in my life it probably wasn't that balanced, when I've got couches upside down with eagles sitting in one room, goshawk in another room, peregrines in another room, but that was a long time ago, and I've matured, and now that I've got a family and I've got a very clean wife, all the birds are outside, and it's good. It actually puts a balance into life, you know. It's just the enjoyment of flying, you know, birds of prey that have always, you know, been addictive for me anyway, yeah. Doris is our barking owl, and as everybody on the set realises, she's a very talkative barking owl. And that's, in the case of this bird, it's a juvenile young bird that's doing its usual thing, which it would do if it was around its own parents. That is, just begging for food and being fairly vocal. Doris is at that stage where it's, you know, it's quite cute and all the rest, but fortunately she will grow out of that, and it takes a bit over a year before they actually start to woof. And then it's a full woof woof bark, you know, barking sort of a call. I chose to use a barking owl on this particular job after talking to Craig because it's got such personality. The mask type owls, like you know, like your barn owl, they're very quiet, they're very subdued, slow. It's almost everything slow motion. Well, it's the opposite with the barking owl. There's a lot of personality, a lot of movement, a lot of head turning. Their eyes are fixed in their sockets, so they're just looking around everywhere. So all that animation would be a good component to the film. The downside is the noise. With raptors is they've got this, what I call a hunting weight. It's when they're responsive and they want to do something. So really, I've flown birds where 5 grams can make the difference between it being responsive or not, especially with the smaller birds, right down to little kestrels that we've been flying. They're 140 grams. So 5 grams can make the difference between even getting the bird back for the day. You know, so you really got to be able to know exactly whether that bird's going to be on the money when it comes to flying. And weighing is an important part of that process, yeah. In doing displays and stuff, owls are always a good, fun thing to feed in front of people because they don't have teeth. And if they've got the choice, they'll just try to get the biggest piece of food down they can possibly manage. You know, most raptors, owls are a bit different, but you know, they'll have what's known as this crop. It's like a sack. And that sack there is really a pouch where they can get the food down quickly before anything else can rob them of that food. And they eat everything. They eat the fur, the bones, the digestible food's in there as well. And every 12 hours or even longer, a pellet will come up with all that undigestible food. With the owls and with the diurnal birds of prey, they'll cough up this pellet. The idea is get the food in before anything else can rob them of it, and then sort out the digesting later. We've had 2 wild eagles that are virtually fairly territorial about this location. So they've been coming in and they've both been having a bit of a yak to those birds in terms of calling out. And that's a fairly distinctive eagle sound. It's much more pronounced than just a little peep peep. Well, it's been really good with Grace because once she spots them, she starts calling. And those wild eagles at times were only 50 feet off the ground and coming in. And once she started calling and they picked up on it, they're going, what are 3 mature eagles doing in our hunting area? What was great about that is once we had the birds really focusing, we were just saying, get the second unit out here quick, you know, and start shooting some stuff. So they managed to get some really good footage. The male was doing some great display flights, you know, saying this is my area. So he'd go right up and he'll tuck his wings in and just drop down, you know, and really spectacular little stoops that he was doing in it, up and down like this. So we got wild eagles doing exactly what we really needed to work in with some of the scenes. So that was really great, diving through the trees, circling around, stalling and turning, and even some little dives.